so they promised their own officers would search the scene, but discreetly.
And the yard went back that day, and the yard went back the next day. And the view was, it was clearly expressed to me that there was nothing there of significance.
Booth kept the latest ransom run secret from the press, but he was desperate to keep in touch with the kidnapper. So he persuaded the family to make a direct appeal through the media.
I am on the phone at home. I'm there day and night. I'm just hoping that they will get in touch with me. But I will make one other point. We have had a number of hoax calls, and these people, frankly, are wasting their time, because we shall not act, I shall not move from the house until I have definite proof that Leslie is alive and well.
If this silence of the kidnappers continues, will you start to fear the worst?
I suppose I must. I don't know. You know, I never get round to thinking that way. If we could just know something, if somebody would just contact us anyhow, we don't care how.
The media appeal failed to persuade the kidnapper to make contact. But after a week of silence, there was a new development, one that would transform the whole investigation. West Midlands Police asked Bob Booth to examine a car which had been abandoned in Dudley on the second night of the kidnap. As Ronald Whittle had waited for the kidnapper to call, a gunman had opened fire on security guard Gerald Smith outside the Freightliner's railway depot, just 300 yards from where the car had been found. But in the third major blunder of the investigation, the police had failed to notice the car for 8 days. When they did, they found several suspicious items, which they thought might be linked to the disappearance of Leslie Whittle. When Bob Booth arrived at the scene, police gave him a cassette they'd found inside the car.
I hope and I pray that that cassette is going to play music. I just pray for music. I want anything. But what I don't want is to hear Leslie Whittle. If Leslie Whittle speaks on that tape, I thought, we're doomed.
Had the West Midlands Police missed a priceless clue for more than a week? Booth was about to find out.
Now, going to the M6 North to Junction 10 and on to the A454 towards Warsaw. Instructions are taped under the shelf of the telephone box. No need to worry, Mum, I'm okay. I've got a bit wet, but I'm quite well now. I'm being treated very well. Okay?
My prayers for music just were shattered at hearing Leslie's voice. And from that moment on, I feared not only for her safety but her well-being, because I'd lost 8 days in the investigation in the vehicle that was used to kidnap her not being found.
There were even more clues inside the car. 4 envelopes that gave details of a ransom run involving phone boxes all over the Midlands. Booth followed the trail. It was the route Ronald Whittle would have taken if he hadn't missed the crucial call on the first night of the kidnap. It led to 2 kiosks in Dudley, just yards from where the kidnapper's car had been abandoned. Here, a message directed Ronald Whittle to drive across the bridge to the Freightliner's railway depot. And on a lamppost, police found another crucial piece of dymo tape.
It said, "Cross Road, onto car park, to gate 8 of Dudley Zoo." That's straight in line with where the shooting took place of Gerald Smith.
It was clear that the kidnapper had been laying the ransom trail to a drop point at Dudley Zoo when he'd been disturbed by the security guard. That was why he'd failed to ring Ronald Whittle at the kiosks on the second night of the kidnap. Booth was now convinced that the man who'd kidnapped Leslie Whittle had also shot Gerald Smith in cold blood.
I was dealing with a most ruthless, merciless killer. And there is no doubt in my mind at all that at the drop of a hat, he would kill again.
There was even more chilling news to come. Police found that the bullets fired at Gerald Smith were identical to those used in murders by Britain's most wanted man. Leslie Whittle was in the hands of the Black Panther. The Black Panther first hit the headlines a year earlier, when sub-postmaster Donald Skepper was murdered by a hooded gunman in Harrogate, North Yorkshire.
My impression of this man is a man who is quite cold, utterly ruthless if he meets the slightest opposition at all, and has no compunction about taking human life. Any member of the public who has any thoughts at all about having a go with this man, my advice to him is don't. I repeat, don't.
Police quickly linked him to dozens of unsolved robberies, in which the intruder had used a brace and bit to force open windows, had cut telephone wires, and had worn a black hood. Five months later, he killed Derek Aston during another late-night confrontation in Lancashire. Now policemen all over Britain were hunting him.
This man is obviously a thinker. He's cold. And I think one can say that he's obviously ruthless. And the worry is, of course, that he may do it again.
Within 2 months, he had. Postmaster Sidney Grayland was shot dead, and his wife Peggy battered senseless with a pistol. The Black Panther had killed 3 times in 9 months and left Gerald Smith fighting for his life. Now the same merciless killer would decide the fate of Leslie Whittle. The news that Leslie Whittle was in the hands of the Black Panther made headlines around the world.
It was just the biggest news story that anybody had covered. I mean, it was like big enough that a local heiress had been kidnapped, but then to just get shortly down the line and find that a man that the police were hunting called the Black Panther could be the same guy. It seemed beyond belief. It was everywhere.
But still, the kidnapper remained silent, and as the trail began to grow cold, Bob Booth again wanted to mount a detailed search of Bathpool Park, scene of the failed ransom run on the 3rd day of the kidnap. But how could he do it without proving to the kidnapper that Ronald Whittle had involved the police?
This man can't beat the resources that are deployed against him. Never.
He decided to gamble on an elaborate hoax. In a documentary about the kidnapping, Ronald Whittle would let it slip that he'd taken part in a secret ransom run.
This is the first time I've mentioned this in actual fact, but I went out on the call. It was to Kidsgrove in actual fact.
In the same programme, Booth then pretended to know nothing of Whittle's contact with the kidnapper.
Are you going to have to go for this man if he contacts Ronnie Whittle again?
Pardon?
Are you
again?
going to... Yes.
What do you mean, again?
Whittle says he's already made a contact. I would have thought you might have known about this.
But I don't know about it until you've just raised it now.
Well,
when did you get to know about it?
Well, we spoke to Whittle yesterday, and he mentioned it. He said it was the first time he'd mentioned it to the press, and I wasn't quite clear whether he'd mentioned it to you.
Are you telling me now that Ron Whittle has been out somewhere dealing with a man he believes to be the kidnapper?
Well,
is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm not telling you. I'm simply saying that that's what Ronnie Whittle told me.
Well, then, I'm afraid this has got to terminate.
I was fully aware it was an awful deception to have to carry on, but it was so. It was an operational means of getting through to the kidnapper.
Booth believed that the kidnapper would understand that he now had a legitimate reason to search Bathpool Park. And, as he'd suspected, it did contain vital clues. A piece of dymo tape discarded by a land drain, which read, "Drop suitcase into hole." A spanner used to unlock the metal bars on the drain, and a torch on which the dymo tape message had been fixed. All had been missed in Scotland Yard's search of the park 7 weeks earlier. It was yet another police blunder.
I just couldn't believe it, because my trust had gone into the yard telling me that there was nothing there of significance. And here I am now confronted with evidence in my wildest dreams I never thought to hear about. You didn't have to search for it. You just had to walk there into the park.
Scenes of crime officer Philip Maskery was called in to follow the trail of clues into the underground shafts which ran beneath the park.
My specific brief was to come to this land drain, which was the drop-off point for the ransom, and to pick up on what was our best evidence at that time. I was lowered on a rope down to the bottom of this shaft, and it's at the bottom of the shaft that we really found our first two items which were going to be of any interest to us. One was a dymo tape gun, and the other was some elastoplast.
At the bottom of the drain, Maskery found a network of tunnels. If this was the kidnapper's base, he had a choice of escape routes. Back on the surface, Maskery inspected a raised area of the park, where a pair of binoculars and a leather jacket had just been found. Here was another shaft, which had to be searched.
My thoughts on the day were that I was possibly following where the kidnapper of Leslie Whittle had been. I was finding certain things, such as a reporter's notebook, a tape recorder, batteries, pencils, that sort of thing. Most inhospitable place, cold, damp, unusual noises, fear of rats, vermin, all sorts of things.
Maskery followed the trail of clues to the bottom of the 60-foot shaft.
Right down at the bottom, on the bottom platform, there was a piece of foam. I could see a metal hawser going across the foam, and also there was a sleeping bag in a plastic bag. The metal hawser was secured to one of these metal ladders right down at the bottom, and the other end of the hawser went underneath the bottom platform. When I got down and leaned over and actually got my head underneath the bottom platform, it was virtually face to face with Leslie Whittle. She was tethered like a dog, hanging from a metal hawser by the neck with no clothes on. And to imagine a 17-year-old girl having to endure that and finally to succumb to it and die here beggars belief.